Advisory Committee meeting for January 11th, 2024 begins right now at 4:03, and we do have quorum. All right. That was a call to order. I do this. All right. So we want to look at our minutes from our last meeting, 2023, September 14th, 2023. Are there any revision recommendations? Okay, if not, can I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All right, the minutes from September 14th, 2023 have been approved. All right, so this is our first meeting for 2024, and I think that's pretty exciting. So it's good to see everybody. All right, public appearances. We have Sue, is there anything that you wanted to say? No? Everything relates to the agenda.
I'm just listening and
Okay.
happy to be here.
Yep, great to have you here. Great to have you here. All right. Next on the agenda is the agenda review for today. Does anybody have any recommendations for any changes?
Looks good to me.
Well, okay, I move that we approve the agenda for today, January 11th.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, minutes are.
Aye.
All right. Our first agenda item is the 2023 annual report, which was in our packet. Do you want to go through it, Anna? Or
Sure,
is it-
I'd be happy to, yeah.
Okay, and then if there are any questions or clarifications as we're doing that, please give those.
All right, well, Happy New Year. Thank you for coming to our first meeting of the year. The first item on the agenda is just to go over the 2023 annual report. This is what goes to council, and I probably should do, probably should have added my December staff report to the packet as well, but the long story longer is we were told, hey, do the annual report, don't do a December staff report, and then we ended up doing a December staff report as well. So at any rate, so for the annual report, so this is just everything that happened in 2023. I put in our Tree City USA information. We should get that designation again this year from the Arbor Day Foundation. Basically, it's got, the amount of money that we spent, and the volunteer hours is a highlight and a kind of a kudos to this group and to Sue and to our volunteers across the city. That's a very high number, and that was all of the advocacy for tree preservation ordinance. That really added up in terms of hours spent talking to committees and attending meetings and doing that sort of thing. Also watering trees, which Sue Easterday was part of. And our group in Chicory Meadows, our group in Dolly Conservancy, and our group in the Wildwood Kettle, and our group that sometimes works in McGaw. So we really had a tremendous amount of volunteer hours, so that's a very, very encouraging sign. I was very impressed by that.
It was 1,500 hours you estimated.
Yeah, I mean, it is huge. And part of it is just the multiplier factor. In Chicory Meadows, for example, there's between 4 and 6 people who are often working out there. So if they work for 3 or 4 hours, that really adds up. So it's just a tremendous amount of volunteer hours. And the watering of the trees really added up because it takes quite a bit of time. Last year we planted.
The one question I have is you were saying over 1,000, and here it said 200 volunteer hours?
You're looking at the second page. In the
Right.
first page, there's a volunteer hours logged in the second bullet.
Oh, okay. So
So the 200 was for just a subset.
Yes.
For that specific event or those events.
I missed that distinction.
Good question. Yeah.
I think the 200 is for the Chicory Meadows, if I'm not mistaken. Is that?
Okay.
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 So anyway, At any rate, so, volunteer hours really added up quickly, which is great. We did plant 401 trees last year, which is a lot for our size.
We're not expecting to plant that many.
No.
So it all happened because it ended up raining in the fall?
So we had a pretty big spring planting, and then it did rain in the fall, so we did do fall park planting, and then we did all the Lacey Road trees. So, yeah, it was, interesting. But it turned out to be 401 trees. Pruned 225, removed 117. And then our total expenditures, 125.46. And then I just wrote a little thing about the post road planting, because that was a first for us in terms of planting in a 4-foot terrace, planting barewood trees, and it was kind of an interesting collaboration between City of Fitchburg, Department of Natural Resources, Madison Tree Canopy Project, and Dane County. So that was interesting. And then I talk a little bit about the tree preservation ordinance. And then I talked a little bit about natural areas management. I didn't emphasize it too much. We do a lot with that, but we could do more. But anyway, and then emerald ash borer, I don't know if it's hard to say. All the trees we're treating now are in good shape. They structurally are really pretty good. They're in good spots. I don't know if we're at a point where these are the trees that will keep forever or not. It's a little hard to say. And I don't know if we're beyond peak beetle flight or not. I just don't know. So we'll see. We'll see what this next year brings. And then some pictures of Post Road, some pictures of Southdale. And one interesting thing too, it's like, when you talk about trees planted, one thing that I thought was, I should have probably pointed this out, but just one accomplishment we did in 2023, which I thought was significant, is, we acquired Town of Madison in October of 2022, October 31st. So we haven't had it, we've had it for a year and change. We haven't really been responsible for that neighborhood for very long. And we've already gotten all the ash trees down, and there was, I don't know, a dozen or so, which doesn't seem like a lot, but they were huge. They were hanging over power lines. It was kind of a interesting tree removal. We got all those trees taken down. They were all dead. We got all those stumps ground, and we got all those trees replaced. So I think that's a fairly significant, even though it doesn't really maybe show through because it's only, a dozen trees, or, we replaced them with 10, or I forget if we took down 10, we replaced it with a dozen or whatever. It's not an impressive number, but the effort was fairly intensive because it was, it was tricky removals, and then to get all of that down, to get all the stumps ground, and then to get it all replaced is actually, I think, more work than people would think. So anyway, I do think because some people really accuse us of not doing much in Southdale, it's like, well, we're really doing, I think, what we can for sure. So anyway, that's the 2023 snapshot of the annual report. Always a lot going on. Don't really capture it always the best in an annual report, but I think I kind of give you the highlights. You've got an idea of some of the things that we've accomplished. Does anyone have questions or comments? Or
I don't recall having this exact report last year. Maybe we did, but do you have a sense of some of these, like trees planted, pruned, volunteer hours? Those numbers feel big, but I don't have a sense of what they were in 2022 or prior years, or what, if we're trending in a good direction, I guess is my question.
We are. I have all of that recorded. I can get that to you if you'd like. Last year,
I don't think we need anything formal. I guess my question is more just your instinct or your thoughts on that, if you think it's going in the right direction.
The only thing I'll add is, like, this is trees that the city took down, I didn't include in here all the trees removed from Lacey Road. So that would have kind of changed the equation a little bit, because I didn't really have good numbers for that. But and we didn't do it; a contractor did it. But at any rate, we are trending in a good direction. We've got, I want to say, anyway, our removals to planting ratio it's decent. we always plant more, but it's not always in the same place or the same kind of trees. So it's kind of hard to quantify.
Yeah.
But I think we are trending in a good direction.
So I had wondered, I know that you talk a lot about networking with DNR and other agencies,
Mhm.
both to get resources for new plantings as well as to get volunteers to do the plantings. Is that something that you've been doing? Did you do more of that last year? Or how long has that been going on? Because it seems like to keep up this pace of progress, it's very dependent on the time that you spend networking with the other agencies.
You're 100% right on, and the one thing I will say is that, we didn't stop, I didn't necessarily stop networking, but we weren't really able to do a whole lot because of the pandemic until this year. So like that DNR project, we had talked about in 2020, and we weren't able to make it happen until this year, just because of pandemic stuff. So you're right, like, I'm still doing a lot of networking, it just looks a little bit different, and hopefully now we can kind of do more of the in-person projects. So we don't, so we kind of can keep those relationships moving forward, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, no, but that's a really good point.
So I'm just looking at your urban forestry report from 2020. You did send that, and there is some information on here that the committee's going to want to know.
Okay.
So can we just include that at this agenda point, because it does include what you've done last year, but this is specific for December. Well, at least the
Yes.
inventory. I think would make sense to talk about the inventory.
Sure. Yes.
As they complete it.
Yeah, so, and I'm sorry for like the disjunction, like I was told, don't do your December report, just do the annual report, and when I did the annual report, we had not finished the tree inventory, so I didn't want to put it in there, but Linda brings up an excellent point. One thing we did in 2023 that is not reflected in this report is we did move forward with the ARPA, and ARPA is the COVID money, I believe, and I'm not really sure what ARPA stands for anymore, I've kind of forgot, but at any rate, so we had $25,000 of ARPA money to do a tree inventory, and we did hire Walktel Tree Science to do that for us, and that was a video, I think I sent out, there was a video of me talking
I
about
watched that was good.
Yeah, thanks. I was super nerve-wracked and had like 1,000 things going, and I thought I looked terrible, but whatever, it's fine. So anyway, so thank you for watching and thinking it was good, so I appreciate that. But at any rate, so we did get that done by the end of the year, and we did survey, I mean, we're still getting the data back, but we did survey most of the urban service area, and we added 2,000 data points, which is kind of amazing. And we also did the Delhi Conservancy, because we're going to be doing hopefully some management work in there. And that was actually a separate project. But the kind of highlights of the tree inventory, we had 3 arborists. They literally ran around. I mean, they were moving fast, and they were measuring trees, doing a condition assessment, and doing the species. So we have a lot of really great information. And when we get it all or when we get it, our GIS person I've been talking with our GIS person, and there's a lot that we can do with that. And to your point about drones, we could fly a drone and then match really current we could match the drone footage that's current with the inventory to kind of get more canopy information. So I'm trying to figure that out.
When you talk about GIS, you're talking about the computer programs or apps,
Yeah,
right? That
yes.
are used on the computers and on your phone
Yes.
to be able to utilize this data in a very
Yes.
functional way.
Yes, absolutely, yes, it's right. So then it's geolocated, so we know where it is, and we know, it just turns the tree into a point, and then we have the information. And I'm not super slick with it, because it's changed a lot, and I'm old, but I'm getting better.
I'm hearing that more and more from other staff too, as they get new programs that are very complex and layered,
Right.
that there's a learning curve, and it's not, you can't just sit down typically and figure it out. You do need, some facilitation with that. So
Yeah.
I think it sounds like it's a wonderful program, but it's
Yeah. No,
there's a learning curve.
It's something you have to use a lot routinely, or else you forget it pretty quick.
This is true.
And it's just, I tried to learn some of it too, and then it was like, if you don't do this routinely, it really doesn't help to just get exposed. There's nothing intuitive like about it.
Exactly, no, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. The upshot though is like, once we get this information, once we get it migrated into our GIS infrastructure, then everyone can use it, which is awesome. So we've already started talking about sidewalks, and the sidewalk contract that's gonna be put together here for sidewalk fixing for next year. They already sent me the list of trees that are in conflict with sidewalks. We can go inspect and figure that whole thing out ahead of time instead of like,
Wow.
yeah, it is nice.
Yeah.
And I do
So it
have
helps
that,
with communication as well as everything
Absolutely.
else, yeah.
absolutely.
So
and I have
like
that on my
repairing
phone.
sidewalks, like where trees have gotten big
Yes.
and they're kind of shoving the sidewalk up and all that.
Yep. And so I have, so I've got it. you
And then
know.
protecting routes when there are when the sidewalks are replaced, which I have.
Yes.
I don't know, I've kind of seen them digging out tree
Yes.
roots in my neighborhood when they
exactly.
repaired some. It was this huge pile of roots. I was like, oh my goodness. It did, like, you really have to dig that deep? You're just pouring this deep. What was all that about? I was just a little bit horrified. I was like, oh, tree, you look all right now, but
Exactly.
how's it gonna be later?
No, exactly. So that's hence the root cutting and that whole thing.
So all of that you can facilitate and kind of maybe lessen.
Hopefully, that's the idea. So we'll see.
And we might just briefly touch on that a little bit too when we get to 2024.
Yeah, but I think it's getting better. But at any rate, from a big picture perspective, what the inventory allows us to do is it gives us the information. So, you know, when all of these things come up between sidewalk conflicts, between, you know, leaf pickup contract, all these sorts of things, we have information we can draw from. Because the last inventory was fine, but it was done in 2013, it was getting a little out of date, and we just did not have the staff to keep it up. So I think this year, I rewrote our intern position description so that because we're done, usually we finish spring planting and then that intern starts, so that's a perfect time that they can get all those new trees go out, geolocate them, get them into the inventory. So hopefully we get more of a rhythm that we can actually keep it up to date and continue a slow roll forward to keep good information, so we've got, we can make good decisions and we can collaborate with other departments a little bit more easily.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, it is. Actually, it really is, and it's just,
So how many trees do we have?
I think they did 12,000 was that inventory, but we have more than that. We only did the urban service area, so this summer, hopefully we can pick up Country Vineyard and Briarwood and, where else? Anyway, Greenfield and other places where we don't have, that we didn't collect in this. If there was a lot of drive time, I didn't want to do it, and we only had 25 grand to spend. So, so I think they had 12,000 if I'm not mistaken, or maybe a little bit more, and, which is great. And then,
What were you guessing that you had?
I
If that's a good number, typical number, or anything like that?
Well, I had told them we'd probably do 13,000 points, so it was about right.
Ballpark?
Yeah. So so we'll see. It's good to you know, kind of just have better management tools and get better information and just.
Right, and it seems like a lot of times sometimes there were grant applications or other things that you had been interested in or completed, but they required that kind of information.
They did, right.
So now we'll have that maybe to access.
Right.
So did they go to all the trees that were already planted and
Yes.
known?
Mhm.
So they looked at everything,
Yep.
all of them?
Yep.
Oh,
And they added a lot.
yeah, added the ones that.
Yeah, which is great.
Okay, great, okay. So everything's current then?
For the most part, yeah. I think we still need to do some work outside the urban service area, and and we'll be planting trees here in 3 months, so. So we just need to make sure that we, just keep it going, which is great. And to your point about, grant information, current information, if we can kind of marry up the drone flights with the, we can get better canopy information, which is sometimes what we need, so, yeah. Anyway.
I'm just curious about the tree inventory. What trees are you counting? Are they the ones on the terraces or all the trees? Do they have to be a certain size before they count? I'm sure you're not counting every last, buckthorn tree and so forth.
No, so we didn't do any invasive shrubs. If it was on the public right-of-way, so we did terrace trees, we did some right-of-way trees, which includes medians, and includes, neighborhoods, like, for example, we updated Southdale and we updated Belmar. Belmar doesn't have sidewalks, so we called those right-of-way trees because there is no terrace there. So we didn't. If it was
What
on
do you
public,
call it? I'm sorry.
we call them right-of-way trees.
Right, okay.
So
Because there's no like curb and sidewalk, right? So it's just like right away, yeah.
and then we had boulevard or median trees, which was PD and fish hatchery. So we had a couple different categories, but it was trees on public property. We did not do, the only woodlot we did was Dolly Conservancy, and we didn't include the invasive shrubs on that. It was 6 inches and larger trees, and that's because we have some interest in running a management plan for that area, so we really needed that information. I feel like, let's see.
Well, the inventory is about trees that contribute to the canopy and not the invasives, which actually can damage the canopy.
Exactly, right. Yeah, exactly.
And the trees that we want to maintain and
Yeah.
protect.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I feel like we did a fairly decent job of giving them the parcel layer so they knew what was public and what was private, I hope. And they, like in looking at the data, it seems like they did a good job of staying on city property. So we only did, the only 2 parks we did in any kind of comprehensive way was McKee and McGaw, our two community parks. And we did not do the woodlots. It was the trees in what you might call the curtilage, or near playgrounds, near shelters, near basically the mowed area. So and I mean finished mowed, not rough mowed. So so we do have a little bit more work to do to capture our other parks and to capture trees outside the urban service area. But yes, so it was basically public trees that were trees planted in any on public property that were not in a woodlot.
Sue, did you have a question?
What about the rest of the parks, and you answered it?
Oh, yes. And that's a fairly, hopefully, easy for me to say. I feel like that should be a fairly easy thing to do in the summer because to take, to go to Wildwood and to run through there, and, I mean, that's part of a day. I mean, it's not a huge, you could go and do it and it would be relatively straightforward. So, so it feels like it's doable.
Well, something else I learned in the last 2.5 years when we were working on the preservation plan ordinance is that people often thought it would be super expensive to have an arborist go through and identify all the trees. And I thought, you haven't gone through those areas with an arborist before because you take a sweep and you identify most things. I mean, that's my experience, that it, as you said, I mean, that's what you're saying. It doesn't take that long because you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly, and can get it just recorded. It's so yes, and we do need to do the rest of our parks because that's a pretty updated inventory too. But anyway, so
great. That's great news, and thank you to the council for approving that, the funding.
absolutely,
That's great.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, a lot of support all around, which was great.
This has been going a long time that we've been working on trying to get this done, so.
Agreed.
Just kind of always been kind of a discussion item, so it's
Right.
really cool to have it accomplished.
I agree, yeah, and have it, in a working format so we can actually really get and use it, which is awesome. So, all right.
And in the process, wasn't it that the old data was uploaded into a new software system or more modern or more current software system?
So
Because wasn't that part of the issue? Some of it was like an older software.
Well, we had taken all the old data and migrated it into GIS, and at that point, I think we were using Esri at that point. So yes, we've brought data along, so to speak. But we're not, I think maybe what you're getting at is we're able now to use our GIS architecture that we have here within the city instead of buying software. I think the issue is if you, at least for us, it was really hard to keep the software current because then you're supporting the software. And the last software that was purchased was, it was based on some software that the city no longer maintained, so we couldn't run it. So it was a little bit frustrating from that perspective. So we just migrated all those geolocations and all that information into GIS and kind of used it that way. And now we're thinking about using the Esri product. It's we get it with our GIS subscription. It's called the tree management software. I think it's what it's called, Esri tree management software. But we'll see if that fits our needs or not. We'll see. But yeah, so it's been an interesting progression in terms of the software for sure.
I just want to point out two other things that were on that list, just so because we had talked to the council about this too, that the application is in for the international or the World Wide Arborist Association.
Yeah, we have 3 applications in, so I did Tree City USA just to make sure, because I think we'll get that one.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to overshoot and then not get anything.
Oh, yeah.
Because that would be terrible. So that's submitted, and the growth award. I submitted a growth award for us from the Arbor Day Foundation, and then I've got Tree Cities of the World. I've got it done. I just need to plug in the data from the tree inventory, and then I'll send it off. So we're like so close. But yes, but it's
That's
done.
very exciting. I mean, that's another milestone.
It is,
We're
yeah.
talking about milestones.
Yeah, it is. So we'll see. But I have talked to them, and they said everything that we have should pass muster, so I think we're good. I just need to get the rest of the tree data information in there and press send, because they want it broken down, numbers of trees, species, size, all that stuff, which we have. I just need to get it on the data. So anyway,
Yeah.
yes. Which, thank you for bringing that up.
Awesome.
It is awesome. Yes.
Okay, any other discussion about 2023? We'll move on to 2024, which is
It sounds good.
Yes. Thank you, Brendy. I keep thinking my phone is going, but I don't think that's. I keep thinking that my phone is ringing, but that's not the case. I don't know what I'm hearing. Anyway, all right. So one of the things that I think we have another kind of recurring agenda item that we haven't really been able to tackle fully, and I'm hoping this is the year, is to write a strategic urban forestry plan. And so I had put together a proposal last year and written a grant, and it didn't really move forward for whatever reason. So I'm really hoping this year, the grant's written, I can resubmit it, and we can hire a consultant to actually help us with this. The reason I put this together now is that there is money available through, I believe it's the Infrastructure Reduction Act, or excuse me, that doesn't make sense. It's infrastructure reduction. It's inflation reduction. It's either the inflation reduction or the infrastructure. I can't remember. I think it's the it's IRA, so I think it's the Inflation Reduction Act.
okay.
And
Money.
anyway, at any rate, so there's money coming to Wisconsin DNR, but it's specifically for what they're calling either at-risk or I think they're calling it underserved neighborhoods. So I asked, I said, Fitchburg has healthy neighborhoods, do we fit this criteria? And I haven't heard back if we're able to apply or not. I made the case that we should be able to. I don't know how far that went.
This is the same money, the Inflation
Reduction
Yeah,
Act.
inflation. Or
Yeah.
is it another thing?
It's,
Okay.
well, so it gets confusing, Linda, because in
Right.
theory, DNR should have their normal pot of money for their grants, and then they're supposed to get this additional pot of money from the feds.
Okay, so are you thinking about, then this would be a strategic plan for specific neighborhoods? It wouldn't be for the whole city?
It would
Or
be
is
for the
this-
whole city.
Okay, all right.
It would be for the whole city.
Alright.
So depending on how that
And
grant,
maybe a 5-year plan.
right, and depending on how things shake out, we either may be able to apply for it through their normal grant process or through the IRA process, depending on what the rules are. If we can't do a citywide plan with the IRA process, I will figure out what we're eligible for and submit for that. So, anyway, I'm sorry it's kind of confusing. I'm not explaining it very well, but hopefully there's grant money to,
Well, every new initiative comes with its own vocabulary, and
you're exactly right.
clarifying that is important, but that each new one comes with its new vocabulary.
That's true.
what I find.
And lots of acronyms that
Right,
don't always
and
match
the
up.
funding sources, correct.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to take advantage of some grants, some federal grant
Right.
opportunities and some state grant opportunities to make this happen. And I kind of just put together some bullet points that basically outline what we would be doing. And it basically would be trying to figure out, okay, we've been planting, and I say about 350 trees annually, which is about right. We've been planting all these trees. Basically, we've been planting trees like maniacs. We need the then what?
Right.
So that's kind of what the idea would be, okay. How are we gonna maintain these trees? How are we gonna replace them eventually? What is the expectation for canopy, we already have a canopy goal, how are we gonna get that? What is the expectation for, any tree
New
preservation?
planting care, right?
Right.
We've talked a lot about that.
Yeah, exactly. So it just kind of outlines some of those things and now that we have the inventory, we have some really awesome data to draw from, which is great. So we have a really good foundational data to say like, okay, great, this is what our, we have these canopy goals, we all know trees are good, this is what we have. So we have basically a foundation of what we have. We kind of need to brainstorm a little bit more about what we want, and the plan would be like, okay, this is how you bridge that gap. And I'm hoping to be able to, like I said, write the grant, get a consultant to help us do that. And I talked to a few consultants last summer. I said, I don't want this binder. We need like 10 pages.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, hey, this is what we've got. This is what we want. This is how you get there. Like, that's what we need. We don't need a whole lot of language about how trees are good, because we know that.
Right.
So anyway, it's kind of an interesting, and the other thing is we do face a lot of plant health kind of challenges that we don't really have the capacity at this point to address. The only pest we address is emerald ash borer. Last year we started addressing spongy moth, and it was okay. It was definitely a learning process. It was okay, but there's a lot more we could do with that. And I think the idea behind it is to maintain things that we've planted, to reap that investment, and to retain our large trees on the landscape. Because you don't just, plant and forget it, or think that's a beautiful oak tree, isn't that great, and just not think about it, because, before you know it, something's gonna happen and you wished you had taken action prior. So, anyway, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but that's kind of the idea behind it. And I just wanted to let you guys know with this outline. The other thing that has come up is woodlot management has come up a fair bit. And I attached this resolution just so folks were aware of, woodlot management is not always very straightforward and does take a lot of advocacy. And I think with this process, we would come up with some general woodlot management goals that would fit into the Park and Open Space Plan and that we could work from, so we don't have this sort of like, I don't want to say showdown, but this sort of like conflict or whatever every time we try to go into a woodlot and do some management. And I think each one of our woodlots probably does warrant its own management plan to some extent, but I think we do need some overarching direction from a plan like this, a strategic management plan that says, hey, woodlots are not just a let it go. We do need to do some routine management in there, and this is kind of what that looks like depending on the situation. So I think that's something we kind of need to think about. But in order to really get rolling on that, I guess I don't know what to do about this resolution. But we because right now we can't do things in McGaw. But anyway, so that's it. So there is some things that need to be addressed before we can do implementation.
Right.
So anyway.
Right. Well, specifically for McGraw, and maybe so. After we talk about this bigger plan that's going to incorporate the primary needs and values for tree maintenance, preservation, and establishing a 30% tree canopy cover, then maybe we can talk just a little bit about what maybe is doable for 2024, and maybe we can talk about McGaw and that, and a few other things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, Linda brings up an excellent point. There's, a lot sort of on the agenda for 2024, this, the plan being one of them. Before we jump into the dates, I feel like really now that the job that I have is funded full time, we can actually get traction, which is really great. And then we do have an intern. It's really nice to get traction. So I think we can really, move forward with some of the things that, like to your point earlier, that have always been a conversation point, but we never really quite had the staff resources to actually make things happen. And now is a really great time. I think we need to strike while the iron is hot, so to speak. I kind of hate to talk in cliches, but there is going to be a lot of state and federal money available to do urban forestry work, especially the kind of stuff that we're interested in doing. So we really kind of need to be, organized and strategic, and the plan will help us with that. And then we need to really make sure we've got the resources from the city perspective in terms of staffing to do what we need to do, and we need to constantly, I think, be thinking about the next thing, because trees are a long-term investment, and you can't just you can't ever just be like, good enough, you kind of are always thinking, okay, now we've done the tree pruning, we need to make sure that we've got, we've got things in place to do any structural pruning, and then, and
Well, and then climate change, mitigating climate change is huge. So
yes, we have lost more trees to climate change than it's those winter warm-ups, they kill trees, and I don't know what to do. There's nothing we can do about it, but I get so aggravated when it goes above freezing and then for a couple of days and then plunges down, trees are dying, and especially young trees that haven't been established. And every year we lose trees to that, and there's not much we can do about it, and I try to be super careful. It
So
doesn't.
what occurs actually in the process? What is it that's so damaging?
So-
Is it because the sap starts coming up
Yeah.
and then it freezes in place or something?
Well, what happens is, trees, they have to change their sugars to carbohydrates in order to freeze. That takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of energy to stay frozen. So when the weather warms up, especially if our native trees are better at this, but if we're planting trees that are more accustomed to southern climates, what happens is that they'll come out of dormancy. Exactly. So the sap starts running, they come out of dormancy, and then if it gets cold again, they don't have the energy often, especially if they're young and they're not established, they don't have the energy to go back into, because it takes them 3 or 4 days then to change their physiology back around to freeze, and either they don't have the time to do that, or they don't have the energy to do that, and then they die. And so we lose,
So the next year,
they don't leaf out, they don't have the energy to leaf out.
they don't at all.
Or they kind of do, but they don't have the energy to
And they
sustain
kind
it.
of fizzle out, yeah.
Mhm.
Or have some dead branches and then just kind of keep going downhill.
Yes.
And is that the same with bushes?
Yeah, shrubs can
The
do
same
that too.
thing, yeah.
So it's just, and it's a,
So I've seen stuff in my garden, I'm like, what did I do wrong? This plant did great for 15 years, was beautiful, gorgeous, and I'm like, what happened to that,
well,
And so, I just seen those things happening, and it's just kind of startling when you're like, well, now I've got this big bald spot. How'd that happen?
well,
So it kind of throws everything off. So it's complicated.
well, it is. And what has happened the last couple of years, we haven't had that so bad this year because it was just warm. But for a few years, it'd kind of get cool, then it'd be 70, and then it would be 10. And it was just like, I think in December 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I can't remember when, it was like 70 plus degrees out, and then 3 days later it was well below freezing. It's just like, well, trees, they just can't adjust that fast. It's those temperature spikes, particularly in the winter. In March we had the same issue where, and I can't remember what year it was, where it was in the 70s and then below freezing. And so everything came out of dormancy and then it all froze again. And it did not have the energy to make those adjustments. But anyway, Ann, you have a comment?
Yeah, would it make sense to plant more native trees if they're more
Yeah.
resistant?
Yes, and I try to do that. The thing is, I'm always going for diversity, and I'll dabble a little bit with things that in theory will meet our zone, but we're at the edge of their zone, but sometimes I'll get bit in the butt. So
Some of it's the issue of terrace, what fits in the
Yes.
little space.
yes,
I mean, a big oak's not gonna do well.
not necessarily, see, and you bring up a good point. The other thing is we're going for canopy. So often, when we plant 401 trees a year, you're not gonna plant, at least in our situation, you're not gonna plant 401 canopy trees. Every third tree is probably a canopy tree. You're filling in the space in between with shorter lived, smaller stature species, and those are often the ones that can't take the climate ups and downs. Because the big terrace trees, the big canopy trees probably are more native trees. So it's and you just never know what you're gonna get weather-wise. And we've had some wonderful wonderful years for growing trees and some really terrible. And it's just the way it goes. And the drought doesn't help. So anyway, long story longer, it's the overarching plan would address some of those things and give us a little bit of guidance and kind of go from there. So at any rate, and I feel like I probably skipped over some of the things that you are wanting to address, Linda. So
Oh, I have a list.
Well, one thing I was just thinking, talking about the different trees and with the inventory, is it something that you maybe already have or is easy to pull together, something like, trees that have a diameter above a certain size, how many we have and what
yes,
kind of trees
Yes.
they are, and then how many are like native versus non-native and things like that,
Yes.
that might be just kind of interesting
Yes.
to look at, just in broad percentages. I think that might be kind of interesting to look at.
yes, you are 100%.
And you probably know what, it's like, oh, this is a wrong mix, or this is a good mix, or whatever,
You bring up an excellent point, because that's exactly what the inventory hopefully will serve for, because to say like, okay, great, how many trees do we have that made it to 30 inches? What are those species? What did we have to do to get them to stay there? That kind of stuff, like, so we know, you hit the nail on the head, so we know where to put our resources. If Katsura trees aren't getting over 12 inches, maybe we shouldn't be planting them. Or whatever, I'm making up Katsura because we've lost a lot of them to winter temperature spikes. But anyway, so you bring up some excellent points where if you've got the data and you want to separate it out by, okay, let's take a look, or do we have trees that are falling apart before they're getting to canopy? And really our Freeman maples probably are. So it's like, well, maybe we should be planting those. So you're exactly right that to look at that data with a little bit more finer grain is really important, because it's like, well, what good is it for us to plant, let's say, Freeman maples in mass if by the time they get to canopy size they're falling apart because they have such bad structure, which we kind of know now is what happens. But it's a good thing just to have, from a mathematical point of view, just so you know it and can talk about it intelligently instead of just like understanding that that's what's happening. So yeah, no, you bring up an excellent point. That's exactly the kind of, I don't know if you want to say analysis, but like digging through the data, that's exactly the kind of stuff that we need to be doing. And I've been learning how to make dashboards with GIS, which it does exactly that, where you can pull out species, you can pull out size, you can pull out condition, and get that information, and then know also what neighborhoods do we have that have poor conditions, trees in poor condition that we really need to think about. Well, we're gonna need to really be thinking about replacing these, because we're one ice storm away from losing a lot of trees in this neighborhood, or whatever it happens to be. So yes, that's exactly the kind of stuff that we need to really be thinking of, and having that inventory information up to date is exactly how we get there. Instead of just kind of knowing, well, geez, in these different neighborhoods, we kind of need to be thinking about this, which we kind of all know, but it's better to have it concrete in black and white.
I would like to talk just a minute about McGaw Park. So my understanding, so there was a resolution, and you included that resolution about
It's
5
here.
years ago, might be
Yes.
6 years ago this spring. The neighbors did not want the invasives removed from the woodlot. It's our park, it's on city property, but they didn't want it removed. My understanding is primarily because they wanted the area green, they wanted it as a visual block from the park and from the road. So because of all the advocacy at the time, the council decided that there would be no more done to that woodlot for at least 5 years. So the question now is, everything we have in the books about, city planning and ordinances, the responsibility of the arborist, says that woodlot should be cleaned up because the invasives make it minimally usable. The invasives threaten the trees we want to survive, and that our job is to clean it up. So, I think everybody agrees with that part. So we just have to figure out then how to deal with that resolution and move forward on that, and whether or not we need the council to approve that.
The Common Council?
Yes. So if we do need the council to approve it, and Sue is here if she wants to talk more on this, she actually had an idea about what might make good sense, is to talk about the various phases of development in this area and related to the woodlot in particular, with some pictures and history, and then what needs to be done now to maintain it as a woodlot rather than a thatch, which is kind of what it looks like. So
Rather than a what?
thatch. When I walked through it, so I heard stories about it, and then I walked through it with Sue, and it's pretty obvious. It's overgrown with buckthorn, and there are trees ready to fall. And Anna has talked about the path is not very functional anymore. It's deteriorated. There is a path through it, so it needs work.
Well, and if I can just come in the path, that there was a park course. So this, and I can give you a lot of information about McGaw Park, but basically when the city purchased it in the 70s, it was to be, they used stewardship money, so it was state money that it was used to purchase this park. It was purchased as the community park for the then town of Fitchburg, because prior to that, Greenfield was the community park and it wasn't big enough, so they needed more space, they needed a bigger park. So that's why it was purchased, and it was a farm. It was farm fields, mostly pasture, so it was open. Except for, there are some oak trees in there now that have been in there since, for quite a long time. But if you look at the aerial photos of what it was like when it was purchased, it looks nothing like it does now.
And you've planted trees, you've done a lot of
Tons,
planting in the park.
Yes.
And then there's a beautiful prairie restoration.
And it's beautiful, partly because Sue has given us plants and seeds and done work in there, which is great. So thank you, Sue, for that.
And it's
But-
beautiful.
And at any rate, so long story longer, I think I would like to fold woodlot management into our management plan as well, just to kind of get some direction with it. However, that does not help us in this situation because we have specific direction not to
What do you want to pull into it? What?
I would like to put woodlot management into our management plan.
Yes.
Our urban forestry management plan, but that doesn't help us with this specific situation because we have council direction not to do anything basically in these areas.
So that's something we need to, that
Yeah.
needs to be addressed specifically.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
even if we do have woodlot management in our management plan and we'd like to move forward with it, we really can't because of this resolution that says,
I thought you said that the resolution had a 5-year limit?
It doesn't
A
expire.
minimum of
though.
5 years.
minimum of
So it
5
doesn't-
years. So it says, basically it says that including a 5-year implementation plan, including only areas in work 1 and 5.
Have all
Okay.
the other areas been worked on?
Yep.
It strikes me, one first step, if this hasn't been done already, is I would love to get Valerie's opinion on
Oh, that's.
what this resolution requires the city to do and what it suggests we should do, and if we wanna work on the woodlot, what do we need to do to overcome the resolution, withdraw it, what the options are there,
That's a
just
good
from a
point.
logistics standpoint, cause I don't
See, and
I don't specialize in that, so.
that's an excellent point, because I really don't know either, because the last sentence is, any further approval and implementation of the plan in areas 2, 3, and 4 would be reviewed and approved by Park Commission and Council at the appropriate time. So it's like, well,
And it might be worth reviewing too, that the houses that go along there, see what percent of the residents are the same as the ones from 5 years ago.
some of the,
If there's been much
they're the same.
turnover.
Well, there's been turnover, but the same people are there that were opposed when we did this. I mean, they're there.
But again, the conditions of the park are different.
They are, well, the neighborhood is completely different.
Are there any other
Yeah.
woodlots that have similar treatments where we have these restrictions in place for any of the other ones? I think that strikes in favor of potentially trying to overturn or withdraw this resolution just because why should these people get a disproportionate say in the use of our public lands, so.
Right.
But I would think anything we would wanna start with just seeing what our options are, cause it does seem like a problem, and I think it's a problem that is squarely in the realm of what this committee should be focused on.
Yeah, and I do feel like, when we're talking about urban forestry includes, woodlots. It's not just the tree that you plant, in front of the building, in front of the terrace, whatever. It includes all of this. So it's a fairly holistic approach, which is kind of nice. So I think it's completely appropriate for this group in Park Commission to look at this. And it's a good point though, because I really don't know. Do we need to rescind? I don't know. I don't know what needs to happen.
Okay,
So
so our first step then would be make an appointment with Valerie to review this.
Yeah, I think we would want just the city's stance on what this means, how we read this, and then what our, as a committee, I don't think we have much that we could do about this, but what would we need to bring to the common council if we wanted to change what the restrictions are here?
yeah, and it's been 6 years, so I think we're within the time frame that they've they've pointed out. And we have done quite a bit of work in areas 1 and 5. So there is some proof of concept, and we've done quite a bit of work in other woodlots too. So there is some, I mean, like if folks wanna know, hey, what are you talking about? We have different places to point to, like, hey, this is what we're actually.
Would you be able to gather some of those comparison points? Because I think it'd be really helpful, especially if we need to bring it to the Common Council to say, here's examples of places where this has worked really well, where the restoration was necessary in a similar way. I think that would be
Absolutely.
very helpful.
No, you're exactly right. And one thing I'll just comment about, just generally speaking, woodlot management, a lot of our woodlots are on areas that previously were not particularly wooded. They were probably more prairie and maybe with some oak savanna in there. And if you look back at the surveyor notes, the plants that were growing there were mostly dry prairie plants. So while the hydrology of this area has changed to allow, let's say, buckthorn to grow or honeysuckle to grow, the soil has not changed. So the soil doesn't necessarily support, like that invasion of I don't know if I want to call it an invasion, but like all the silver maples that came up in McGaw, they all died because that kind of a tree needs a different kind of soil than was there. The hydrology let it get started, but it couldn't thrive, it couldn't really get established. And so we have all these, they're gone now, but we had all these half dead or 3/4 dead silver maples because they couldn't, because they couldn't survive. So it's not, so I think you bring up an excellent point that we need some comparison points about what is possible. I mean, we can't change the soil. So it's not like we can just throw whatever we want in there and expect it to do well. That's just not realistic. So,
I even think those comparison points don't necessarily need to be Fitchburg ones if they're just similar in terms of what and I have no idea if you know any ways to find those other ones, but.
there's plenty, there's tons out there.
All right, who should be part of the meeting who wants to be part of the meeting with Valerie?
Yay.
Sue would like to. Is it who wants to be part of the meeting with Valerie? Talk about this.
I think that'd be really helpful, Sue, because with the park commission aspect to this, I wouldn't want anybody to think that we're saying that the park commission shouldn't have a voice in things either, so.
All right.
Should you be there or not be there?
Dealer's choice, whatever. I never quite know. I'm happy to be involved if it's appropriate. If it's not, I won't. I just don't even
Craig, do you
know.
want to be there?
I don't know how many, if we run into the open meeting rules. I can if need be, but I wouldn't want to run into any trouble there, so.
Okay. I'll figure it out.
Also, I don't know that you would need to be there. I think it's fine if she wants to, but I think Valerie's take on what we can or can't do is important kind of regardless of your presence there. So that's not to say you shouldn't be aware of what we're talking about, but just in terms of what who needs to be there, I'm not sure.
And
that
Sue, you
adds
can
a whole
speak unless you're not supposed to be there, but you can speak to the specifics about the areas of the park.
And I think you bring up an excellent point, Craig, because there has been a lot of interpretation of this. And really, if you look, because it says that we're not supposed to implement the management plan. Well, the management plan includes taking down hazard trees, maintaining trails, doing all these sorts of things. So does that mean we can't touch this area? We do have hazard trees in there, some of which fell onto the neighbor's property. Are we not allowed to go in there and take care of that? Or is it like, well, only go in and do what isn't going to cause a problem? Well, that's not really, that isn't going to cause the neighbors to complain. Well, exactly what are we, so you bring up an excellent point, because there's a lot of different ways to read into this. And I think the way that some of the neighbors have read into it is like, well, just do what we ask you to do. Like, this just means you can't, do anything we don't want you to do, which really is kind of unfair. So, because they still do want the path mowed, they still do want, hazard trees taken on, so this sort of thing. It's like, well, we do have this resolution that basically says we can't implement management plan, which says we're supposed to do all those things. So it does get a little bit, sticky. And we did go to council once, and Sue knows this. We went to council once to do some work in there to take down some trees that were falling on the neighbor's property, and it was not without a lot of discussion. But anyway.
Who are the alders who are? Do we know who the alders are who represent that area? I don't off the top of my head.
I don't know either.
That's just something that, I would think that they would be the ones who maybe have the strongest voice in that conversation, so we'd want to make sure that if we are going to bring anything to the common council, that we make sure to get their opinions.
Okay, we can find that out. I can help set that meeting up, but if we have a quorum, a walking meeting, whatever the problem, I don't need to come, so I'm fine with that. Okay, good. I'm glad we have a first step with that. I'm very happy about that too.
Yeah.
Another milestone.
Yeah, and I do feel like, just to avoid this issue in the, one thing I've told is we really need, because the Park and Open Space Plan does a nice job of kind of outlining, basically giving a huge framework for how we deal with woodlots. We really, in our urban forestry plan, we really do need to kind of fine tune that a little bit and say like, hey, in our woodlots, we should be doing and have, you know, have specific management for them. However, we really do need to be considerate of, you know, the different points we've been talking about. And just so there isn't a whole lot of interpretation of, well, on the woodlot, you're supposed to be doing this, but not this, but this, like, because that's just, it gets a little.
Well, and I really think that a lot, based on my own experiences, there are a lot of people who, it's not necessarily intuitive, you know, what is required to maintain healthy trees. I don't think it's necessarily intuitive.
Right.
So I think we're still, you know, kind of educating and doing outreach and moving in our culture from, you know, what's green and decorative to what's healthy and what's required for maintenance. And I know that's come up in the park in other ways too, like with people parking on tree roots, parking cars on tree roots, bumping up against the bark of new trees. And I know that's something else that we've talked about too, that the park commission, I think, is going to work on, and we're going to work on that together.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
So,
you bring up some excellent points.
One maybe closing point before we move on from the urban forest management plan. What, besides getting funding for consultants to actually develop the plan, what is the process for, would that be something that we would want approved by the common council? Would that go kind of the committee route to get input, or what's?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that would tie in really nicely with this, because if we had a woodlot management plan that was shopped around, everybody had a chance to say their piece on it, and then we end up with it, then you can always come back to that and say, this is the city approved, here is how we treat situations like this, so.
Yes, absolutely, 100% right on. All right, are we ready to move on to dates?
pardon?
Are we ready to move on, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, so thank you for weighing in on those things. So I wanted to let people know, obviously this is our meeting schedule. I'm not sure, anyway, so I put the meeting schedule on here so folks have it. And then I don't know if everyone got my email, but our mayor was fortunate enough to receive an Wisconsin Urban Forestry Council Leadership Award. So she's going to be receiving that award at the Tuesday, March 12th council meeting at 7:30. So feel free to attend. I was really floored. I mean, it's awesome. It's just, she's getting a great recognition for work on tree preservation ordinance and just basically supporting forestry, making the job I have full time, that kind of stuff, which is great. So, anyway, if anyone's interested to attend that meeting and see her get the award from the Urban Forestry Council, that is on March 12th, and it will be at 7:30.
I think that would mean a lot to her if we could all go. I'm going to make arrangements to be there. Yeah, it's on a Tuesday. Yeah.
Typically, those awards are also done towards the beginning of meetings,
Yes.
so
They are.
it wouldn't necessarily be a huge time commitment.
No.
They start at 7:30. I think all the meetings start at 7:30. So if we could all be there, that would be great.
Yeah.
I think that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's well deserved, and I was just really grateful that she was selected. So that's awesome. And then I'm starting to get Arbor Day stuff put together. We've got so on Tuesday, April 23rd, that's when the proclamation will go to the Common Council. Again, that's a 7:30 situation. If someone wants to go there to get it, that'd be awesome. We don't have to decide that right now. I just want to throw it out there because I know calendars really fill up. And I just wanted to throw that out. Arbor Day is Friday, April 26th. We were hoping to do Rose Common Park either that day or Saturday. We've got Linda's Neighborhood Association gave us quite a bit of money to buy trees for that event. And then we also have, I wrote a grant for trees for Chicory Meadows, Wildwood, and Dolly Conservancy. So hopefully, I don't know, I haven't heard if I got that grant or not, but hopefully we'll have some additional funds to plant trees in those places as well. So I think I find out, I want to say the 15th, which is next week. So we'll see. Anyway, so those are some of the dates coming up, just so folks are aware. I didn't want to, it seems like we're always kind of trying to get our calendar together, so I just wanted to kind of get those out there so everyone had it, right off the bat.
And I think I just want to do one initial announcement, just that the city is funding a sustainability committee. So they've hired somebody, Blue Dot, to do a study. They have lots of good data. The RCC is kind of the committee who initiated it, and Phil Groupie is part of it. So I volunteered to be part of it, and so did Sue.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, so we'll be advocating for some of the things that we do here, and also some of the things that we talked a lot about last year. Where does tree protection and preservation come in public works and transit and transportation, for instance, new buildings? All those are the kinds of committees that are all part of this group. So, for instance, we're on the water and wastewater working group, and have brought up the importance of trees in consideration in regards to clean water and floodwaters management. And so I think, so it's just another way of trying to incorporate the values that we've talked about and what we see as essential in various aspects of the community. So.
Yeah, I'm grateful you guys are on that committee, and I did contribute some things to the initial, baseline documents that you've probably seen, and I'm grateful to kind of see what comes out of the whole process.
Yeah, I'm too, and you and I have talked a little bit, and I've already asked you some questions that I think are helpful in terms of being part of that. I always think about, how do we replace grass?
Yeah.
Turf grass, how do we save money on mowing and labor and still have a really nice looking park? And of course, prairie grasses are ideal, but that won't work for the whole park. So you were telling me that
Normal, fescue, things
the
like that.
normal fescue grasses probably would be the best thing to use. So talk about that, and then the concept of peat islands. We've been talking about that, and I really had to think about that a bit, because all I could think about was, well, we tried to plant trees, more trees, when we did the upgrades with Fish Hatchery Road. We ran into lots of problems for lots of reasons. Always expanding roads and more paths, but also the utilities underground that prevent us from planting trees. So just thinking a lot about that, because heat islands need shade. We need shade, and typically trees are the way we get shade. So that's just the new terms to be thinking about and applying as we think about the various aspects. And we talked about this last year too. Our city is developing very quickly, which is why it's great that we got some progress in tree protection with the preliminary plats. But we also think a lot about the widening the roads. So while there's initiatives to have more in terms of, walking and bike accessibility, I have to think about how many trees we lose in the process if we're going to have bike lanes on both sides of the roads, if we're going to have walking paths on both sides of the roads, and whether or not, when we consider trees, is there a little bit different way to do that? So as a community, we can have everything we need, and that's the goal. So all of those things are on the table.
I think that's awesome. I think that's really great, and and I think we're getting some traction, which is great.
And just overall, I think it helps to know what all the other committees are doing in the city, and there's no way you can sit down and listen to all of them. But if we think about which ones maybe are having the most impact now, and some of the goals that you personally see as being priorities, or we see as a committee, any information we can bring back that might be helpful in supporting, other initiatives and the ones that we've identified would be great. So.
Yeah, which is awesome. I did email you my December report. I have to put it into the packet, so it's part of the,
Okay.
my December report, because that ended up being a request that came in after this packet was put together. And the highlight there was the tree inventory, which we already talked about. And also just, I'm getting tree planting together for spring. The one thing that's coming up this spring that it's not a huge deal, I'll just mention it. We are, in some of our new developments, we do have tree pits, which is something that we planted 4 of them in the past, and they don't have tree grates. And planting those 4 trees was a huge deal. So I'm gonna pull out the tree pits and make that a separate contract, so that doesn't mess up our tree and park, or street and park planting. We can deal with that separately, and if it goes great, awesome. If it doesn't go well, it doesn't sink anything. I think it'll be fine. It's just a little bit of a different project in that you need a little bit of a different equipment. You have to do some hand digging, and I have no idea what utilities are in there. So it's anyway, it'll be interesting.
What is it? Tree pit?
Tree pits, yeah. So
What is that?
so basically, there we have a development where the terrace is paved. So they pave the terrace, then they cut out the concrete where they're gonna put the tree, dig the gravel out and everything that went into making the concrete, put dirt in, put a tree grate over that to prepare the planting site, and then we need to pull the tree grate up, plant the tree, and then put the tree grate back. So I mean, it doesn't sound like that is that big of a deal, but
Good dirt or decent dirt is, soil only goes how deep though?
well, it's supposed to go 36 inches below grade, but I don't know if that actually happened. So that's gonna be in the contract, like if it isn't right, like this is what we need. So I can't really spec that for the tree pits and then spec something different for the terrace trees. So anyway, so I just wanted to mention that's a different, it's gonna be something new this year. I'm pulling that out and doing that under separate contract. So it should be fine. So anyway, just an interesting tidbit.
I think those are the big things on my list. Is there anything else? Anybody else has a discussion or announcement?
One announcement that I have is we did get a draft meeting handbook, I guess.
Oh, good. I'm glad you brought this up.
So, and it's gonna get finalized here in the next, few weeks or something. So we're supposed to have that in our February agenda to go over this handbook, and it's I think the upshot is minutes and how minutes are supposed to happen. I think we've been fairly reasonable about minutes in this committee. There's been a lot of angst about minutes in other places. So it basically says that, so one change that you'll see is it basically says that whoever's recording the meeting, which typically is a staff person, you record what happened at the meeting, not what was said, just to eliminate, just that's the way it's supposed to be. And so what we'll do is we'll have more things in the packet that you take action on rather than talking about it. So for example, I put, instead of saying in the meeting, hey, these are gonna be our Arbor Day activities or these are the meeting dates, it's a page in the packet that then is referenced instead of the minutes being referenced. I don't know if that makes sense. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, well, I hope they go over some of the Robert's Rules of Orders and how to do that, like what requires a motion. I
Yeah.
thought about that before we came today. Would it be nice to have a motion about kind of what smaller goals what goals we would have as a committee?
Yeah.
Um,
I think this group will make the transition no problem.
Yeah.
And we'll work together to make it work. It's just a matter of getting everything recorded, either instead of using the minutes as that vehicle, using the packet as that vehicle, which I think we will be fine with. And I don't think that we're gonna have any kind of issues. And Sue knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Craig, were you gonna say something?
I was just curious, who decides that? Where's that change coming from? Is that
Good
a
question.
mayor initiative, or I'm just genuinely curious, I have no idea.
I think, and it'll say on there who the committee was, I think it was Valerie, the deputy city administrator, maybe the city administrator, and probably the clerks. I'm not really sure exactly. It'll say on there. When I quick reviewed it, and it's very reasonable, and I think that was a list of people who actually put that together. So, and it basically follows the rules of the council. I mean, basically, it's basically saying like, do it how the council does it, which is fine. So I don't think it won't be a big issue for this
So we
group.
can discuss anything related to the agenda,
Exactly,
as usual.
right. And we'll just have more stuff in the packet instead of having it, the
Right.
action will be reflected in the packet instead of in the minutes.
But everything is not gonna require a motion.
No, I mean, I said that wrong. The action is reflected by the minutes, the information is reflected by the packet. Does that make sense? So, who's here, what, and what they did. But for example, dates for Arbor Day, times and dates for Arbor Day is in the packet, not in the spell out the minutes. I'm not making any sense tonight, but
Yeah. So some of the things like in announcements, that's not an agenda item. Anything that, or some new things like that we've talked about, well, that's always in the packet,
So anything that's in the package, you don't repeat and put in the notes.
That's correct, yeah.
I think that's the main.
It seems to me like it maybe is also because making those notes and documenting it has some inherent editorializing where the meeting minutes
Right,
might reflect more of somebody's opinion of what happened in the meeting than
that's true. And
the
everything is
actual
documented
facts.
visually anyway.
absolutely,
Oh,
yes, you are right. And everyone's got kind of a different idea of what is right.
And I guess if anybody's curious, they can always go back and watch the videos of our
That's right.
beautiful
Right.
faces in the meeting.
That's right.
Makes me really self-conscious whenever I scratch my nose though. They see me.
Why this is not letting me back in?
Do we have much more that's,
I think we're pretty much done. I mean, there were just a couple other things that, like just the drought situation this past summer, and again, the climate changing to reflect, or so that we have longer periods of time between rain, and then we get a lot of rain at one time. But I don't know how you did all the watering this summer, and whether or not how that's gonna work as we move into the future when we have these. I always worry about new plantings because we don't really have Sue did a lot of,
Yes.
do you have something you wanna say? Okay.
I know I'm supposed to be at the table if I say it. Be a good girl and do that.
So Sue is chair of the park.
Parks Commission.
Yep.
Just in the region where I live, there's Wildwood Park and Wildwood South Prairie Park and Wildwood Kettle. And there were new plantings in all of those, and we found some volunteers to try to keep up with that. And then we even ran and got wood chips and refreshed the wood chips to preserve the water. And I know that Anna, I believe, tried to contact all the neighborhood associations. Not all of them have associations, they don't have leaders, or the leaders are frustrated because people don't respond to those requests, but I thought an initiative could be talked about at future meetings here about outreach and follow through and try to get more neighborhoods cued into that. And it does, we focused on the parks, but even the new street trees out in front of specific, when new ones are put in, is there a group that'll take care of something like that?
I know in our neighborhood association, a lot of people don't we don't have everybody's email address.
Right.
And we have a website, but people don't access it very often. I think, my impression in the neighborhood is people pay attention to signs. People aren't allowed to put signs up on our neighborhood property. that's jointly owned by homeowners. But something like that would be different. I do wonder even about signs strategically placed. I mean, I think all those other suggestions are great too. I think website, anything neighborhood associations have.
Right.
I'm not sure that homeowners know that when a new tree is planted on your terrace, you're the one who needs to water it. I'm not sure they know that. I really don't.
You bring up a good point, and I was thinking about writing a letter to everyone, but I don't know how far that would really get. 'Cause-
Oh, everyone who gets a new tree in front of their, that might, yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah,
I think a letter or even like the little.
door hanger.
Yeah, the door hanger things.
Yeah. Or I was thinking of putting something like a door hanger on the tree.
Or what?
Yeah,
Oh,
note on
right,
the tree.
well, I did
Because
think
then
about
everyone
that.
sees it.
Right.
When we were working at Greenfield Park last summer,
Mm-hmm.
there were people walking their dogs around, and everybody who said, "Why are you in that field pulling out? What are you doing?" Well, we're pulling out wild parsnip. But how would you be interested in one? Every day you take your dog for a walk, carry 1 gallon of water, and go to look at all the young, I just said young trees, and every day pour a gallon on a different tree. And these people, I have no idea if anyone followed through.
They did.
But that would be another
That's a
way.
good idea.
But I like the idea of somehow signage
You're right, yeah.
to, in the parks themselves, the neighborhood parks, to say how can, you live here, you're walking here. If you're seeing this sign, you're making use of this park, we need your help. That type of a thing.
I think, yeah, that sounds very personal. I mean, that sounds like that could be very helpful.
So those might be things.
No, they're awesome. Those are good ideas.
'Cause I really do think a lot of times people just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, you're right. And last year it was so dry. What we did was we picked the 40 trees that I knew we could water 3 times a week, and that's what we did. And everything else was kind of a little bit to chance. I mean, we got the crew involved. I mean, we did what we could, but it was tough because hauling water around is no joke, and those trees require a lot.
And I think people need to understand that even if it's better next summer, we're still gonna be far behind. And those trees are still gonna need help, yes.
And this is a related question, but the large oaks that were saved on West Lacey, how many, to me, in my mind, seeing what work had to be done around them, I'm thinking, how many years of extra watering? Is there a way of getting a recommendation from somebody that you trust about that, or?
You bring up a good point, because we do need to keep track of those trees. We can't just be like, we're
So,
good.
so they're gonna need a lot of extra maintenance?
Well, I don't know what other maintenance, but
Disturbed,
definitely
right?
water, because the roots are disturbed and it has to recover
Through
their large
construction.
trees.
Yes. And we also need to make sure the root flare is, I think there is a lot of, we just need to get in there, make sure the root flare is not full of dirt.
Right.
As much as we can. We do need to water them, and we do need to also think about okay, do they need iron? Do they need that whole, we need to do plant healthcare is exactly what you're talking about. We need to do that. And
What kind of budget do you have for something like that?
not a lot. I mean,
Because I
not
was
a
also
lot.
thinking, we had talked earlier about the roots that were damaged, like in my neighborhood, by some of the trees when the sidewalks were put in, and they were exposed for quite a while, and they were ragged. And maybe if we were able to give them more nutrients now, we could save them, because they're
Right.
very well-established trees. And I think that's another thing people don't realize is that when there's damage like this, it can kill the tree 5 years later, 4 or 5 years later, and I think, so how we treat it now could make a big difference on survival.
Yes, no, you're exactly right, and you're all exactly right, and we do need to be doing things like that. I mean, we have a budget, I think it's, I forget what it is, it's $3,000 or $4,000 to do emerald ash borer treatment, and we don't really do a whole lot of other stuff. I did buy the golden pest oil to do the spongy moth egg mass oiling, which, I think we did okay. We did everything, everything that you could reach, we really drenched, and those are not gonna probably survive. We got the bucket truck in there. We did a fair bit of spraying with the bucket truck, but it's tough. I mean, it's awkward, it's difficult, and it's not something we do.
Spongy moth.
Yeah. the egg masses. So again, those oak trees could probably benefit from a treatment of the leptopro or whatever that chemical is that kills, that takes down spongy moth. And it's not really something that we budget for, so we have to kind of figure out how to pay for it, and we will. I mean, I think we'll be fine. That's something that I would probably put into a state grant.
At my house, I have an old tree that is struggling, and I used an arborist from the region, and they used one of the products for nutrition, and they call it biochar. I don't know, you
Fair enough.
may know what that is,
Yep,
but it
yep.
seems to be just something sprinkled on the
Yep.
soil.
Yep.
It looked like to me, and don't laugh, but it looked to me like the composted soil you pick up from the city. I mean, it just looked like really rich stuff, and I don't know if that's true, or if we have something sitting right down at the yard that might benefit a light sprinkle around those
A
roots.
top dressing, that's not a bad idea at all. The thing with biochar that's nice, I mean, that's better than what we've got, is that biochar, by the structure of it, has lots of holes and crevices and places where nutrients can get attached to and then soak into the soil, and then the roots can kind of take advantage of that. Whereas compost, sometimes that can leach out, the nutrients can leach out, and then it's in the soil, and the roots either get it or they don't. Whereas biochar, there's some retention there.
I see, yeah,
So-
so with the freely available, it might just be fertilizing the grass versus,
Right.
whatever your garden is around there.
Exactly. You bring up you bring up an excellent point. Like, and biochar isn't that expensive.
Oh, okay.
These are exactly the kinds of things that we probably need to be thinking about and doing. And again, we don't really think about this because we don't really have I don't want to say because we don't have the plan, but I mean, basically it boils down to that. We don't really have a plant healthcare portion of our forestry program. And we don't really think too hard, like when we're doing sidewalk replacements, like what's going on with those tree roots.
And what could be included in the contract,
Right.
in terms of caring for the roots. And then how, maybe along with the notification to the homeowners, could be a message saying, please water, if you have a tree, if you have a mature tree, well-established tree involved, or a new one, please know that it will need extra water.
After the sidewalk replacements.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's something called air cutting of roots.
Yes, air screening, yes.
Is that standard for when they do the sidewalk work?
We should be doing that, yes. We should be air screening.
Because I don't, just sitting through various city meetings, it's that thing, I know a lot, I know a little, and that's dangerous, because I don't really know the whole story.
Oh.
But, it seems like every time there's a request for proposal and there's contracts signed for anything, it's very specific what you are and are not going to do.
Right.
And so if, for our sidewalk contracts, is the root care part of the contract?
And I think, and you bring up an excellent point. In the past, it has not been specifically, and part of that just was turnover. I mean, we had so much turnover, we just didn't, the staff, we just didn't even get the contract done at all. So, I think, I need to work with the transportation and right-of-way engineers, but I think what we're gonna do in the future is exactly what you're talking about, have exactly in the contract, this is how we want roots, we want the air spade, we want the roots cut exactly this way, and, all these sorts of things. So,
Yeah.
and then we'll know, and then we can supervise it, make sure it happens correctly, then we can know what to budget for the next year for healthcare for those trees. So it's just getting into the system.
Right, so then you wouldn't secure as many of the observations of people's trees being with exposed roots for several weeks while the sidewalk is going in, because that would be disallowed by
Exactly.
contract.
It wouldn't be acceptable, right, exactly. And I think too, we'll have, I was just looking, we do have a fair number of conflicts this coming year because a lot of them are in the newly acquired Southdale neighborhood. But moving forward, we usually have just a handful of conflicts with trees because we're on top of it. So it's like, once, it's easier to keep up than it is to catch up. So I think once we're kind of caught up, it won't be quite so impactful.
In the meantime, I guess we could talk to our neighbors if we see that if we want to make a suggestion, but.
We're talking about things like, the drought and people maintaining the trees in their terraces and even their own yards too. To me, we should have a plan and kind of do it every year depending on how the season turns out, of having a set article that goes in the newspaper, some video that goes on Fact TV. If there are key trees we know about, like newly planted ones, a notice that goes in the mailbox or goes to each house, or certain things, like sort of a little plan of here are the 5 things we do each year, and they're kind of set to where you don't have to do a lot of rework.
Yeah.
And then just kind of implement them, because it's gonna take repetition, and different people will read the article each year, and some people say, oh, I saw that before, oh yeah, that's a good reminder, and others will be like, oh, look at that, I never knew that. So it's, putting it out there so people learn, and maybe there are other places too to do some informing or teaching of maybe, Arbor Day or something with children. Here are key things you need to do. If there's a drought, do this with trees. If this, certain little concepts, so you get different groups of people, and maybe, then we'll get more ideas of things to do. But I think a lot of people would do this stuff if they knew it.
Yeah.
It's
You know,
just-
like
I mean,
a tree this size needs this many gallons of water this often. If it's like a straight drought, if there's like 0 rain for this many weeks, you need to do this.
And I tried to do that last year. Fact TV is fairly easy. It's hard though. I mean, like you're really competing for people's eyeballs, and
Exactly.
it's really tough. I mean, it's easy to say, and even if you, and putting on a mailing, it's a lot of work, and I don't mind doing it, but I don't think people,
I know.
I don't
So,
think they do this. I think they do this.
what about something really simple? Like if you get a new tree in your this is just one situation. If you get a new tree in your terrace, most people are pretty excited about that, I think. So you already have the tree. I don't know if that would be, how difficult that would be to ask just the crew who planted it just to put that in the door or in the mailbox. Then they would have an immediate notice. And even if you wouldn't have, I don't even know if you need to put a lot of information. You could put, your website is incredible. You have a lot of great information on it. So even if you put a notice that this tree will need extra watering, and here's, where to look, as a guide. Do you think,
We could do that. The most effective thing is your point, Sue, about putting the sign where people walk every day.
right, that's right.
That honestly, I think is the most
Yeah.
effective thing.
Yeah.
Because they see that if they're walking the dog and they have a particular route, or they have a particular way that they run, or that they commute to work or whatever, if you put the signs like in parks or wherever where people see them frequently, I think that's the most impactful.
Yeah.
And
That's
like new neighborhoods where almost every tree is new.
Mm-hmm.
Signs, you could even get cooperation of some neighbors close to the entrance and exits to the neighborhood. So those people coming and going on their errands to their homes, reminder, water your trees.
I think that's a really good point, because, I know from the neighborhood or garage sales, people look at, people tend to enter the neighborhood from the same, 1 or 2, maybe 3 locations, and go by the same, entrance area. And I think signs there, I think they pay attention to, because we don't allow them, so there are not many there.
Yeah.
So there's usually never any, so they notice it because it's different.
Yeah.
So I think
There
they
might
would
be
see
some-
that and read
I
that.
think
Some kind of wording to get a little help.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right on, Sue, and I think once people do know, they do pitch in. So it's
So is that something so we'd need to print signs?
yeah, I don't think that's a huge. Well, I don't know. I'll look into it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a huge lift.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Probably not.
I don't know.
It seems like the bigger lift is actually getting the different neighborhoods to put up the signs and the outreach part of it.
Yeah.
The sign itself is something that we would probably want to come from you on and figure out kind of the messaging from you, but then, talking to the individual neighborhoods we live in and then other neighborhoods seems like even just identifying the good target neighborhoods so that we know where to go.
There's,
would be-
and there's a page on the city website
Right.
of the neighborhood associations that have an association
We
and
get
a
notified.
contact or leader or whatever. So some of that work is done, but there are neighborhoods where there's just no structure to it anymore. And so, but, you know, what great progress to even get 50% of the
Right.
listed
And
neighborhoods
I don't
to
think
do
you need-
something as a first year goal.
Right, no,
And
absolutely.
I think passive permission would be fine. You could just notify all of the ones we have the addresses for. I mean, email addresses. I mean, I'm sure they can do that in one click. And just notice them and just say, let us know if this isn't okay. You know, then, and then that doesn't require a response. Nobody has to take responsive.
No, I think this is good discussion, and definitely I really appreciate everyone thinking about this, and it's something I think we need to, you know, continue to work on, and communication is our biggest issue for all over, you know, just overall, and I think a big part of it is, we're just like the message that we're trying to get out there, we're competing with a lot. We're really competing with people's eyeballs, even,
And people are busy, really busy. Right.
Right, yeah, so at any rate,
One more thing, just in our someone else in my neighborhood, and I really appreciated it, started a Facebook group for our neighborhood. And it was so simple. She designed a sign and the QR code. You get so much mileage out of the QR code.
Yeah, you're right, yes.
That's
yes,
great.
yes.
That could go in that email.
It could go in, it can go in an email, it can go right on the sign.
Yeah,
And I guess you could just have people pick it up too, I guess.
thank you,
know.
I forgot about that, that's a good point, yes. Are we getting kicked out? We might be.
On the right meeting, or this meeting already going on?
We're going on.
We're
but
just finishing up.
We're just finishing up. So, all right, good, excellent thoughts, and, yes, we will keep moving forward.
Okay, sounds good. Well, if there's nothing else, can make a motion to adjourn. Move we adjourn.
Seconded.
All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned at 5:34.
Well, thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah.